Can the Florida home insurance crisis be solved? That's what we're going to talk about today. If you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. My name is Chris Igoe. If you're a returning viewer, I appreciate your participation in our journey. Florida home insurance is one of the main topics that I get comments on in my channel. And so I'm going to address some of those today. And we're going to do a deep dive into what's exactly happening in the home insurance space in Florida, some of the solutions, and what the future will likely look like. So if that is valuable content to you, then please subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend. And without any further ado, I am going to bring on the best of the best in the space. One of my personal friends, I sent him a ton of business. He is who you want to work with if you need home insurance here in Florida. And without any further ado, let's bring him on. All right. Welcome, Todd. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Chris. Doing well. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate you greatly. And thanks for this is a hot topic right now, man. So I love that you're preaching it to people that need to hear what's going on, man. I love it.
Well, as you know, affordability is a major topic of conversation for everyone, especially people looking to buy homes right now. You've got the affordability crisis. We've got inflation going through the roof. We've got all kinds of economic changes. But the home insurance market has been under a tremendous amount of heat recently. There's been a ton of fraud. I've talked in the past in a lot of my videos of some of the legislation that has changed to eliminate that fraud. But today, what we're hoping we can work through is how can the Florida home insurance crisis be solved? And I know nobody better than you to help me work through that. So let her rip.
Yeah, man, this is such a important topic right now because what you just said is so true. People are trying to find ways to save in any area of their lives as they can, especially in the process of purchasing a new home and all of the steps, as you know, you're an expert in this, that go into that process, right? And home insurance, homeowners insurance is a major piece to that process. And unfortunately, it is one that has gotten more and more crazy over the last, several years. And the short answer, well, I'm going to hold off on my answer because yes, of course it can be solved, but it's a process, man. It's definitely going to be a process. I mean, we have seen some pretty incredible things over the last, several years since we were just talking about this. And I'm just rattling some thoughts initially off. Since 2017, there were 7 carriers that went into receivership or bankruptcy. In 2022, 5 more joined. And we have another one that just came out here recently that is going into receivership, and they have $140 million worth of loss that financially they could not absorb and afford, right? And so there are so many reasons for what's going on in the home insurance market. And before I even jump into that, I do want to say, before I get into some of the reason of why it's happening in Florida, and we're starting to see it in other states as well, but the number one thing I want everybody to know is there are absolutely times where there are real and legitimate losses, where people are suffering and families are suffering and they lose houses and they go through these really difficult times. And we're dealing with that. I'm dealing with that every single day. My agency is dealing with that every single day. And our heart goes out to them through the frustrations, through the transitions, through the rebuilding. And it becomes, even more of a process when you have carriers that are now going out of the market. And the reason, really, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, the number one reason why we're seeing rates skyrocket and things are continuing to increase and prices seem like they just keep doing this, and it's affecting people helping to close a loan, trying to close a loan. It's affecting people that are trying to reshop or refinance. But yeah, the insurance is at an all-time high right now. And the number one reason, and this is it really in Florida, which is obviously where our headquarters is, but we're starting to see it really explode nationwide. The number one reason we're seeing that obviously is insurance fraud, right? It's claims that people are putting in, and it's not necessarily their fault. I also want to touch on that. A lot of times this is happening because people just aren't aware they may not be educated enough to know when someone is knocking on their door, and it may be a third-party company or a roof company, and a storm has just hit, and they get a knock on their door. And this happened to me personally, and I'm an agent. I run an agency. And all of a sudden, someone says, hey, we know that there was a storm in your neighborhood. What we'd like you to do is assign your benefits over to us, and we can guarantee you a new roof. And how does that sound? Well, listen, that sounds great, right? To somebody who's not sure or not aware, I'm going to get a free roof, and it feels like, man, I've been paying insurance for several years, and it's my time. It's my benefit. It's time for me to cash in, right? Well, that sounds great. But in reality, what they're doing is you assign all of your benefits over to them. They then go sue the insurance carrier on your behalf. And what it has caused in Florida, and is starting to happen again nationwide, is it's a nightmare. I mean, you have carriers that are losing millions and millions, and over the course of all these carriers, we're talking billions of dollars, where they're getting sued, and they have to now make a decision. These carriers have to make a decision. Do they fight that claim, maybe knowing that it's fraud and paying out all the fees and all the legislation and everything that's going through that, or do they settle? And either way, they're taking a loss. It's going to take a hit either way. And when it's legitimate, of course, that's what insurance is there for, and that's what they provide. But what's happening is people have started to do this so frequently and so often, and you have all of these companies now that are seeing and finding these loopholes, and it's happening across the board, nonstop, at an explosive rate. And so you have carriers that have not priced in to their pricing module when putting together a homeowner's insurance quote or a policy, that now they can't sustain all the losses that are happening, not just the real losses, but all the fraudulent losses that they're now being sued for. And so fast forward 2, 3, 4 years, over 1, 2, and 3, and 4 consecutive years of losses, they now have a lot of them have said, hey, we can't continue to sustain. Receivership, bankruptcy, they're pulling out. You'll see a lot of zip codes are starting to non-renew. Or maybe they're just saying, hey, we're not writing anymore in this area. We have many, many carriers. We used to have over 45 companies in the state alone where you could write them. You could throw them through everybody, and anybody would pick them up, and prices would vary, of course. But now that number has plummeted to where you have a handful, maybe at best, based upon the age of the home, distance to coast, the roof, some of the updates, all those things, right? But that is really what we're seeing as far as the reason behind a lot of the increase in prices. Because, hey, that sounds great for that one homeowner that may get a new roof or may get to redo the flooring or may do this. But what happens is everybody else now has to pay for that, right? My rates increase, your rates increase, everybody's rates increase to cover for those losses. And so that's what we're seeing statewide. We're starting to see it nationwide. And there are some steps in place. I don't want to make this all doom and gloom. There are certainly some positive things and some steps that are moving in the right direction. But it's like anything. It takes time, right? Legislation takes time. There's been multiple things that are on the floor right now that have been proposed, but it doesn't happen overnight, right? But going back to the reason and why we're seeing it, yes, there are absolutely the reality that there are real claims, and there are people that lose a house or suffer from a loss. And those are the things that we want and insurance carriers want to deal with every day to help them, whether that's purchasing, a new home or helping people restore something that's been broken. That's why we exist. That's why the carriers exist. What carriers don't exist for is to, have a fraudulent claim just so that we can get paid and, throw on a new roof or pay off a college fund or do something like that. And again, I'm not saying that's everybody, but I'm saying it's what we're seeing, a massive increase in the abundance of fraudulent claims. And who pays for it? Everybody does. The homeowner does. All of our rates increase, and everybody is feeling that. And we're seeing that now. You're seeing it with, again, another carrier that just pulled out here recently. Where our agency is reshopping all of these today, this week, this month. It's happening right now. But that's just to kind of give a background. That's the basis. That's the beginning. That's the start of why we're seeing the increases of what we're seeing as far as those rates.
Now, in terms of Florida versus the rest of the country, where does Florida rank in terms of fraud?
Yes, so it is the largest state in the country. It is number one for fraudulent claims. And it is interesting because Florida and this isn't the case in every single area, but Florida oftentimes is kind of at the forefront of where we see trends starting to go. And so we've seen it start in Florida, and it's taken off, and it's at an insane amount. And now we're seeing it start to be prevalent in many other areas. And again, it's not something that can't or won't be fixed. It's not something that long term. And again, this is like the real estate market, right? This is like the mortgage market. I mean, all of our industries are very intertwined to some level and some extent. And you see ups and downs, and you see highs and lows. And right now, we're just we're at an extreme level of crisis on the homeowner side. But we oftentimes are a catalyst for what starts to happen across the country, and we're seeing it more and more. We write in multiple states, not just Florida. We're big, and we're prevalent in writing in many states. And what we're seeing is what started and happened in Florida is now starting to take off and be more prevalent in these other areas. So I'm hoping and I'm desiring that some of this legislation will come to pass, and some of these changes, which are in the process of taking effect, will really start to change some things for the better. Because I'm telling you, and you know this, you've seen this when purchasing or selling or whatever it may be, it's come to the point where some people cannot even afford the home insurance to cover the cost of that home. When you're talking about debt to income ratios and the finances and the taxes and the debt, insurance is a major piece in that. And we've seen that make or break loans. I've seen it make or break deals on the real estate side. And that's my life. Our job is to work with mortgage and real estate and close deals. And it kills me to see a family that can't afford the home because of the insurance. That's wild to me.
And that happens. I mean, this happens all the time on a regular basis. One of the first steps in any onboarding process that I do with any client, and I talk about this all the time on the channel, is you must know what your numbers are. So before we even get into let's go shopping for a house, we need to understand, and not we, you, the consumer, the homeowner, the potential buyer, needs to run the numbers on a granular level from a financing perspective, but also you need to have that conversation as it relates to insurance. And while we can't necessarily give you a fully accurate number for the house that we don't know that you're going to buy yet, because we haven't found the house yet necessarily, we can give you a model of what it will look like at that price point. Yes. So it's really important for anybody shopping to get granular with your lender, with your realtor, with your insurance broker, because if we don't know what all those things are, and in addition to that, also taxes. So you need to know what your next home's taxes are going to be. And in Florida, specifically in South Palm Beach County, it's really easy to do that. So you can go to the tax appraiser website, punch in the home that you want to buy, and run what the taxes are with the homestead credit and all that kind of stuff. But if you're working with a professional, they're going to guide you in the process. So you'll know prior to shopping exactly what it's going to cost for you to live in that home to the best of our ability, right? Until we know the actual home, then we can get super granular, very detailed, and give you the exact number. But we can give you a very close approximation of what that's going to be. And there are many people out there that are shopping that don't know their numbers. They don't necessarily, they've done a pre-approval or they've done something, but it's incomplete. So then when they go to actually, or when they're in contract and then they're running the numbers, they realize, oh shit, we can't afford this. They got to cancel the deal. Now, thankfully, that doesn't happen with me. It doesn't happen with people that you work with, but there's 90,000 agents in this market. 1,000 sell 10 deals or more a year. That means there's 89,000 other agents out there that probably don't do this the right way, which is no bueno for you.
No, and listen, you hit that so spot on, Chris. The biggest thing that you can do, and when I'm saying you, I'm speaking to the homeowner, the potential buyer, the seller, is you get those things lined up early, right? Because the worst possible thing that can happen is all of a sudden you're ready to lock in on the deal, and then the last thing that we left and we forgot about, or we leave it to the very end, is the insurance or something of that nature, and all of a sudden you realize, oh man, this isn't going to go through because we weren't aware, we assumed that everything would be okay, and all of a sudden, because of what's happening, the crisis in the Florida home insurance market, yeah, it can blow that thing up, you know? And so it's why you have to start the process early. It's why, and I know you do this with all your clients. You begin this whole thing. You have all your ducks in a row, you know, and that's the best of the best that I've seen. They have somebody in every area, because if one of those goes bad, you know this, the deal can die.
Yeah, 100%. So it is incredibly critically important to do that up front, period. So let me ask you, as far as some of the questions that get thrown to me via YouTube and comments and stuff like that, what happens if you get dropped from your insurance? What would the next step be?
Yeah, so great question. And we've seen a lot of people are facing that exact same question, right? You have, because of everybody either pulling out or non-renewing, there have been so many that are coming to the agency or just in general going back to the realtor or the loan originator saying, hey, what do I need to do? I'm being non-renewed, or they're pulling out or they're going bankrupt. What's my next step, right? So the good news is there is hope. Okay, this isn't all doom and gloom. There is the reality where even if somebody is dropping you, unless that home is absolutely in complete disrepair that looks like it's burnt to a crisp, there are carriers that will still take you. And if you have an issue, or anybody has an issue out there, Chris, that is having an issue getting insurance, please give me a call and I'll send my contact information, because it's very rare where there is not a solution to a problem like this. But yeah, we've seen it happen all the time where they're pulling out and they're not able to get the insurance, or their insurance is non-renewing, or the rate is tripling or quadrupling because the carrier is trying to limit capacity. That's a huge thing right now. They won't necessarily drop you, Chris, but what they'll do is that renewal that comes back, it'll be 4 to 5 times as much, basically forcing you to go somewhere else, right? And that's a big issue that's happening right now. If that's the case, that's okay. Listen, the biggest thing, whether you ever work with me or not, the biggest thing is that you're working with an agent or an agency that has every single available option to them in the state. A lot of these insurance companies, brokers, just like me, we're a broker, will only have a handful of markets, right? If you only have 3, 4, 5 options, you are not going to get the best potential carriers and the best potential rates. It's just like if you're booking a flight, you're going on Google Flights or Travelocity or Kayak, right? No, you want to have all of the options to make sure that the flight is the price you want and the location you want and the time you desire. It's the same type of thing for insurance. You want to go to an agency and an agent that has every single option in order to make sure they're taking all of your current information, right? Your current policy, based upon where you are in the country. If it's Florida, your current inspections, if you have them. In other areas, it could be other things. If you got any documentation of what you have that current policy with, you send it over. Normally what I'll typically do is, if you like the coverages and you were happy with everything, I'll try to match exactly what you have, apples to apples. If there's anything I see that's funny, I will certainly advise you on my thoughts on what to do. But then we'll just take it and we'll run it. We'll run it through our comparative rater, through every single carrier available, and give you the most competitive option that is still available in the state. And whether that's Florida, where there's very little, or other areas of the country where there are still writing a ton. That's really what a good agency and a good agent will do, right? They're looking out for your best interest, making sure that you're insured properly, because that's another thing too. You've got a lot of places that aren't interested, and all they want is, they will do things in order to make sure that that rate is low, but God forbid something happens.
They're underinsured.
You're underinsured. You got to make sure you're covered properly. And that's part of walking through with an agent, all the coverages, going through those types of things, and making sure they understand and agree with those coverages. But there are certainly options. There are certainly options out there. If you're non-renewed, if your zip code's closed, if they increase the rate 4 to 5 times, and they're basically pushing you out, yes, there are certainly other options. And I'll be the first to tell people, listen, right now, even though your rate increased, stay with where you are. This is the best option available currently. It won't always be like this, and I'm happy to reshop, or anybody should be happy to reshop every 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is. I'll do that all day long to make sure you have the best possible rates, because at the end of the day, I'm looking to make sure that you're a long-term client, right? Not somebody that's going to be with me for a month and then go somewhere else, right? And so if I can always provide that as an option, we can provide that as a solution. We know that we've got your best interests at heart. And I've told people, hey, you got grandfathered in 4 years ago. Yes, it's increased $80 a year, But I'm telling you, keep that for right now because that's your winner. And I'm happy to be transparent and honest with that, as opposed to just try to swing them into another carrier because I want them. No. I want what's best for the client. I want what's going to protect them long term. And I want to make sure that they understand what it is that they're actually covered for and covered from.
Yeah. I think you just nailed it there. And I'm going to put your contact information in the ad copy down below. So if you want to reach out to Todd, you can. I am curious though, a couple more questions, and I want to be respectful of your time. What's the 15-year roof rule in Florida?
Great. So great question. And there's not a cut and dry answer. When you say a 15-year rule, you could have said 10, you could have said 20. It's not that cut and dry. I wish it was. I wish it was like that across the board in every state for every
These
carrier.
are the questions that I get on a regular basis.
I love it. No, listen, I do talks and speeches and seminars to real estate groups and mortgage groups. I love this stuff, man. I can do this all day, dude. You tell me how many hours you got. But yes, so it's not always a perfect cut and dry answer on the age of the roof. On people coming and say all the time, what can I do to lower the insurance premium or price, right? Well, there's a handful of things that I can walk through and talk about. But yes.
That's my next question. So if you want
to, I'll kind of combine these both into one. There are a couple things that are really hot topics, or what we call red flags on the homeowners insurance right now. The biggest one and the number one is the roof, right? The age of the roof is a huge hot topic right now because carriers are not wanting anymore. And this used to be, some carriers would take shingle roofs that were 20 plus years old. You had tile that could be 30 plus. The roof is the biggest thing right now because you have these companies that are coming in, and that's where the majority of these claims from these third party or fraudulent claims are coming from, right? So a lot of them have changed. You have carriers that are and I don't want everybody to roll their eyes at this, but you have some that are saying we have to have roofs that are 10 years or less, even on the comp shingle. We have some that are saying 15 or less. We have some that are still saying 20, but they have to have a certain amount of life remaining. Right. So let's say I've got an 18-year comp shingle roof. No problem. We have a market for you. But on that inspection, if you have a 4-point, if you're in Florida, or based upon what the carrier requirement is, you may have to have a certain amount of life left. If there is 0 life left on that roof, you're going to struggle. All that means is we're going to have to go to an excess and surplus company that may be a little bit more expensive because they're taking on a greater amount of risk. But it's not as cut and dry anymore. I wish it were. I have what's called an underwriting Bible, Chris. It takes me through every single carrier and every single requirement that we have within our agency for every carrier. So as the second I get a property to quote, I'm gonna take it through that underwriting Bible and immediately know this carrier requires 10 years or newer. This carrier requires 15 or newer. This carrier requires X amount, but still a remaining life. So it's of course, the newer the roof you have, the more attractive you're going to become to a carrier. But there's more than that, right? It's whatever the algorithm or the appetite of the carrier is. Some carriers want very specific risks, and they'll make their rate more or less attractive based upon that. Some like obviously newer homes. Some are having an appetite or risk for coastal homes. Some want to stay away from coastal homes. All of these factors really play into how expensive or competitive that rate is going to be, right? If I have an older home from 1950 that's 0.1 mile from the coast, that's going to be a lot more expensive than if I have a 2023 home that's 30 miles from the water, right? Brand new roof, brand new electric, brand new plumbing, all of it. So all of those factors come into obviously the cost of the insurance, which is why you want to get with an expert or a professional like you who's going to help guide them with the assistance of an agent to make sure that they're understanding the process, understanding the aspects of each house, because those are negotiation points, right? That you may, because they may not be able to get insurance because the roof is 25 years old or a shingle roof, and there's no carrier that's willing to take them at this time unless they go to an excess group or company. That may be an area that you either have to negotiate or talk to the insured about, or yes, of course, there's things that can be done, to make fixes or changes after closing. But all of those are parts of that process that the insured and the home buyer needs to understand and know about. So yeah, as far as how can you lower the insurance, man, everybody's wanting newer stuff because of, the roofs are an issue. The plumbing is a big one right now. You have older plumbing and certain types of piping, polybutylene piping that a lot of carriers are no longer wanting. You have electric issues that are happening, right, that are causing fires and certain type of electric boxes. And I can go through an entire list of things that are kind of red flags for carriers. But the four main big ones that they're looking at, right? The roof, the HVAC, so the heating and AC, the electric, and the plumbing. I mean, those are your big four, right? When you talk about the big four, those are the ones. If you have updated systems in all of those, you're looking really, really good. If you have updated systems in some of them, okay, that's okay. Don't sweat it. It just means you may be more attractive to certain carriers than the others. If none of those are updated and they're all super old and you're going to be doing a rehab, well, that's a different type of carrier, a different type of policy. You're going a different direction than the normal admitted market. But at the end of the day, I will always say this: I will do everything in my ability to make sure that one, we are going to aid in helping them get good coverage and close on that home. Two, I got to make sure that we are putting quality risks with our carriers, right? The one thing that we have to be careful of from a broker standpoint is making sure we are placing good risks with carriers that want them, because we're only as good as the carriers that we have, right? You put too much crap in a carrier, all of a sudden that contract can get terminated, and now you've lost a really important contract. So it is about good risks, but there's always a solution, man. It's so rare where there's not a solution to the problem. It just takes some creativity, and it takes an agent who knows what they're doing to navigate that market.
For sure. Now, let me ask you, you mentioned some of the risk that's out there, and we've talked about a lot of insurers leaving the state. And now we found that Citizens Insurance really has become the dominant carrier within the state, and Citizens is obviously subsidized by the state. So one of the things, so I'll let you jump in here relatively soon. One of the concerns that I have talked about in the past is that if Citizens becomes the insurer of last resort, which is what they were supposed to be, now they're the dominant player in the market. But worst case scenario, and we're just role playing now, we get hit with 5 massive catastrophic hurricanes that come through and devastate everything. And they are now set up with massive claims that must be paid out, right? So then from that perspective, their capitalization, which is limited to a degree, could then, in my opinion, end up being some sort of hit to the taxpayers or homeowners throughout the rest of the state. You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah. So you are speaking right in line.
This is a doomsday scenario. I'm giving like a very unlikely scenario.
No, you're speaking right in line with the current situation and what we're seeing, right? So it used to be exactly what you just said. You said it perfectly, right? You said it exactly how it would have. Citizens, it's a state-run program, right? It's a government-run program. So it used to be truly the insurance of last resort. If there was another carrier or option to go to, we would be pushing that all day long. Well, what's happened is Citizens has now become the largest and number one, really. I was looking at the stat. It was originally they only had at one point like 400,000 policies in the state of Florida, and in a matter of months, it was over 1 million. You know what I mean? It's like the increase of what they're taking on now has been astronomical, and they are starting to impose. Citizens is directly starting to impose a couple things that are making it. That are making homes a little bit more careful when being able to be placed with them. We have seen they're tightening their guidelines of what they will accept and what they will not accept. It used to be like, man, they're going to take everything. Citizens is going to take. You got something, Citizens will take it. Don't worry. Well, right. Since then, they have become and tightened some of their guidelines on what they're going to accept and what they're not accepting, and made it not more difficult. Isn't the right way to put it, but they've just been more careful. Been more careful is the best way that I can describe it. Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, the Florida Insurance Guarantee Association is there. It is the reason that it exists is to be able to help individuals in need in a catastrophic event where, like you said, worst case scenario where there's a doomsday type of thing, and that is why FIGA exists. It's why we have the Florida Insurance Guarantee Association. What I will tell you is Citizens was never supposed to be what it has become, which is now one of the number one insurers, in the state, and certainly the number one in certain regions all over the place. The good news. Let me transition to the good news. So that was never the goal. The good news is there is legislation right now. There's been bills that have been passed that will see some light at the end of this tunnel, and that's where Governor DeSantis is involved, and that's where the legislation's involved, and that's where there have been things that have passed. And now they have just been amended, and they're on the floor in order to provide relief for what we're seeing right now in this crazy market. I will tell you, just like anybody else knows, unfortunately, that relief in this market doesn't come overnight. If you were to ask me, are we going to see anything change in the next several months? I would say probably not initially. My best outlook on it is we're going to weather this storm, like so to speak, no pun intended, for the next 1 to 2+ years. What will start happening, and we're seeing it even now, we're seeing a couple additional carriers come back to the market, even in this carrier that has recently gone into receivership. There's somebody else that has stepped in to absorb 75% of that book. And we are seeing reinsurance carriers, and we're seeing carriers that are coming back into the market, which is good news. I can't describe how good that is for people that aren't really in that industry or don't really understand, but it is a light at the end of the tunnel that about a year ago, nobody was seeing, right? All we were seeing is drop off, cancellation, non-renew, drop off, cancellation. So we are starting to, based upon all of those factors, we are starting to see some positive things that are happening. Does that mean by next month, Chris, you're going to send me your policy, I'm going to reshop it, and you're going to drop $2,000? No. We're going to have to weather this thing a little bit longer, just like it happens in other markets, real estate, mortgage, other things, right?
Well, and that's to speak to that point. That's what my contention has been that as they've rolled out some of this legislation, we've started to get more competition back in the market. As you've got more insurers in the state, then that obviously brings competitive pricing, and that takes time.
That's the equation. You hit it. That's the equation.
And so what I've talked about is I think the realistic timeline for that is somewhere between, aggressively, I would say it's 12 months, but more realistically, 18 to 24 before you actually feel the benefit of that. But what my question to you then is, and again, I know you're not an accountant, but again, doomsday scenario, is Citizens capitalized in a way to where if there was a massive, negative economic impact to the state, do they have the capitalization to pay out on that, or does that look more like an assessment to the citizens of the state to subsidize the shortfall?
Yeah, so they their responsibility would be held to up to the dwelling amount of that insured individual, right? So when we talk about all the coverages and we talk about all those things, yes, the bottom line is let me be really clear when I say this. Their responsibility, Citizens' responsibility, is to insure up to the dwelling amount for all of the policies that they have in place. With that being said, if something catastrophic happened, it would shake me. It would shake me to wonder if that would actually all come into play. Because again, this wasn't something that was ever supposed to become the number one insurer in the state. It wasn't set up that way. It wasn't made for that. It was made for, like you said, the option of last resort. So I want to be careful on speculating that based upon my relationship with carriers.
Right.
It's the reason that we need to be placing risks outside of Citizens. And the more these other carriers come back in, the more everybody will start to feel less burden and less responsibility. So I'm going to be straight with it. That's a touchy subject, and it's a tough one. I know what their responsibility is. I know what they are fiscally called to provide for the insured. I would, but at the end of the day, I'd be worried.
Right. And fortunately, we got DeSantis, who's taking steps to try to solve this problem as quickly as possible. And again, that takes time. All right. So I guess we'll wrap it up with this. And I really appreciate your time. You are the best. So if anybody has any questions, I'll have Todd's information in the ad copy down below. But what do insurance companies not want us to know?
Man, that's such a great question. That would have been easier probably to answer, several years ago. I think that it's changed so much in the last couple of years, and not even to the point where it's where they don't want us to know something necessarily. I think now it's more the shoe is on the other foot, and they are begging, almost pleading, to be very, very careful when you are going through filing the claims process, right? So what does that mean? Instead of initially saying, hey, I've got water damage, instead of not going through the proper channels in order to file the claim, which means call the insurance carrier, have all your policy information ready, give them your policy number, walk through with the claims department everything that happened. Instead of doing the proper channels, which is that, a lot of people are initially saying, got a claim, got to call an attorney, or got to call a public adjuster. And because that's happening, immediately that is where we're seeing the majority of lawsuits that come through, right? Florida isn't the number one state for insurance claims. Let me be clear about that. They're the number one for lawsuits, home insurance lawsuits. It's 79%. So it's not that we have the most claims, it's that we have the most lawsuits when filing a claim. And this is so important because they will, more than ever now, they will try to work with you in order to find a number that accurately settles the damage that's been done, right? I think we've been so programmed. When I say we, I mean the general homeowner have been so programmed to think, I got a claim, I know a lawyer, I'm going to sue somebody, right? That's kind of our nature. And that is what's caused this, cluster of what we're seeing. As opposed to first, more than anything else, they're begging, go through the proper channels, call the claims department, walk through what happened. They will send somebody out. They will determine. Now, of course, if you completely disagree or it doesn't make sense, then you have to take the appropriate or necessary steps. But the problem is people are skipping step 1 and 2, and they're just going right to the lawyer or they're going right to the public adjuster. And all of a sudden, now we're seeing that have a multiplication effect or a ripple effect on everybody else. So it's not as much what they're not wanting you to know anymore at all. It's more at this point what carriers are asking and begging to be done, because if it continues the trend, if things aren't passed as quickly as we see, it's only a matter of time where it's every carrier that is seeing this. And I'm telling you.
So actually, I think you nailed it, and I'm going to jump in here.
Yeah.
So I think most people have been programmed. And so what are the things they don't want you to know is the question that I asked you. And I think over the last few years, the transparency within the industry has changed dramatically.
Yes.
And so people have a lot more access to information. And with that, because there has been so much predatory type activity within the space, you've got those public adjusters and you've got those subcontractors and you've got those organizations that are kind of feeding the frenzy of that fraud that are also able to market and aggressively pursue those types of claims, right? And so myself included, and those door knocks that you were talking about with somebody saying about a new roof, I'm familiar with that too. I think most people think the first step is not to call the insurance company and work through the process the way that the insurance company would like to. I think their first step, but I look at that as due diligence. I think and this is probably the first pro tip, is actually do start that conversation with the insurance company and get that information so you know what it looks like. And then from there, if necessary, do what you want to on the other side too, and be able to compare and contrast. But I think what you're going to find is that they're not the boogeyman. They're actually the good guy, and they are competitive, and they will work with you, and there is flexibility. And if we go that route, well, then the rest of the free market capitalism will work out, and we will have more insurers, and we will have more options, and we will have better pricing.
You're 100% right, and I hate to say it like this, but unfortunately we've almost done it to ourselves, and it's just a reality. And it may just be, Chris, part of it's just maybe an education piece. Some people don't know, and when you have somebody show up at your door, or if you aren't sure the process, and that's part of it, is just people being educated about that process when they're getting the insurance, which is why you want to work with a great agency and a great agent and a knowledgeable person who knows and can take you through. Because even one step before that, I wonder even, yes, go through the process, do it the right way. Everything you said is exactly right. But I can't tell you how many people, if I just asked on the street, hey, you know what insurance company that you have or who you work with, do you know anything about your coverages? They would look at me like, we don't even know what I'm talking about. So not only that, but even a step before that, know your coverages, understand your policy, what is covered, what is not, because in these days, there are certain carriers that will cover for certain things or not cover for certain things. Water damage, no water damage, personal contents, no. There's so much. You got to know what's in there before you start, going crazy with all those other stuff. So absolutely.
Well, with that in mind, I think there are a lot of people out there, especially recently, right? I think there are plenty of people who, because of the affordability crisis that exists right now, have probably opted to be undercovered, have no clue what they actually are covered for. And then when they do take a hit, or if they do take a hit, they're holding the bag in a way which they had no concept of.
Yep.
And that's going to be that's just going to add more fuel to the problem.
Yes.
Now, as far as you mentioned with the assignability, so somebody knocks on your door, talks about, I can get you a free roof. I noticed you had a shingle broken, which, by the way, is like a $3 glue fix, not a new roof. But nonetheless, if you were to sign that contract in the past, you're assigning it to whoever you're assigning it to. They're going to do what they can to try to get that settlement. It's my understanding now that that language has changed to where if they were to, somebody door knocks and says, sign right here, it's also going to clearly state that the insurer can come after you for fraudulent claims. And that didn't exist as of last year.
Correct. No, you are absolutely spot on that. I don't even have a ton to add. That is something newer that we're seeing and we have seen. Which is just a change. I want to say more than anything in the language, but we are seeing that. And the biggest thing that I can pledge and urge and plead with people to do is just be very, very careful of who you're working with and what it is that you're actually signing. Because everybody has on rose-colored glasses when they sign that document, and you don't always know what you're signing away. You don't always know the content that's in there. And that it can come back and really screw some stuff up.
Well, the pitch has been, because I've had it.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Is sign this and I get you a free roof. However, now it says sign this and we can sue you. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that I'm not going to sign something if there's risk of lawsuit involved. And I think just that simple language, which seems like it's not a big deal, I think that changes. I think it materially changes the desirability of somebody to go ahead and assign those rights.
You're absolutely right on that. And in a perfect world, I would say that would stop 100% of the time. But unfortunately, it doesn't. People hear what they want to hear. Half the people don't even look at the documents that are showing up at the door. But yes, again, all of these things to make strides in the right direction to where we're hopefully not seeing as much of the fraudulent claims that are happening, and more than just the claims, the actual physical lawsuits that are taking place based upon those claims. Because again, claims are real. Let me be really careful too and step back. I have nothing against the public adjuster. I have nothing against the individual that is doing things diligently and in the right way when a claim is underpaid or when they're not paid correctly, I am pro the insured doing and receiving the right thing that they are supposed to receive, 100%. So, every once in a while when I speak on the topic, I get someone that raises the hand and say, well, yeah, but there are real claims and there are real times that they underinsure, and that is true. If that claim is underpaid or underinsured, then yes, absolutely. I understand the role and the responsibility of the public adjuster or of those people that are fighting on behalf of the insured when it's done the right way. I absolutely understand and agree with that. And I want to make sure
clear, and I want to clarify that too. I'm referencing predatory practices.
Yes.
I am not talking about a real claim or someone who has paid for insurance that has absorbed, or it is expected that the insurance company is going to do the right thing. But I'm talking about the fraud. I'm talking about the predators.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think you've been incredibly helpful. I hope we've answered everyone's questions. If you do have more questions, then leave them in the comments below. I'm going to have Todd's contact information in there too. Feel free to reach out to him at any point. He would love to help serve and support you at the highest level. I can speak from experience. He is the best. I use him for my policy, for my family's policies. And of course, I always give 3 references for anybody that I ever recommend or any service that I recommend. But Todd is, and then I wink and say Todd's the best of the best. I'll give you 3, but call Todd.
No, listen, Chris, I greatly appreciate it, man. One of the reasons I love working with you and even listening to the stuff that you put out is, one, because it is so beneficial. It's so real and it's so true. Plus, more than anybody else, I know the stuff I have in my background, you hustle, grind, and execute more than anybody else I know in this industry, brother. So anybody that is listening or gets value from what you're doing, please call, please go to him. He is, I feel like we're just patting each other on the back, but it is so true. You are the best at what you do, my friend. And any way that I can be of assistance, I am here and always happy to help.
Outstanding. I appreciate it. Now, I hope you found this content valuable. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, check out my next video because I suspect you'll love it a lot. And until next time,